I'm sure there were many times in Pam's life where she tried to conceal the truth and deny that she was either using alcohol or drugs or whatever. All of us have lied at one time or another about various things. And I remember my mom, she had this statement that she would always make. She would say, "Your sins will find you out." And that would always scare the EBGBs out of me because I was afraid that what I'd done was going to catch up with me, and rightfully so, because that's what the Bible teaches. And those of you who know me know that I think one of the greatest sermons ever preached in America is R.G. Lee's Payday Someday. The story of Ahab and Jezebel, where they go for years and years and years with their sin, but finally, everything comes to light. Now, if you have sins that have been unacknowledged to God, eventually those sins will rise to the surface. And always those sins will rise to the surface. So it may take a while, but believe it or not, those sins are going to rise to the top. A few weeks ago, I was in the hospital visiting with one of our folks, and she was having gallstone problems. Any of you had gallstone problems, gallbladder problems? Okay. Well, I have her gallstone because it was in a little cup, and I said, "Hey, can I have that?" And so I brought it with me, but I thought, even though I talked about grossing you all out last week, I thought it might not be a good thing to do that. So we took some pictures of the gallstone. Right. Now look at this gallstone. It measures 1 inch by 1.5 inches in circumference. And that gallstone was embedded in her bladder and had to go through a tube the size, not of the pencil, but the pencil lead. So if you've ever had gallbladder problems, you've had a gallstone attack, you know that it is like getting hit by Mars, I mean, it's going to really hurt. Now, the number one cause of gallstones is cholesterol. That means all those little cookies and ice cream and coconut pie that we eat at night, and all those second helpings of potatoes and green beans and the good, juicy, fatty steak, they just store up cholesterol. And your body says, this stuff doesn't belong here. And it tries to get rid of it. So it sends it through the gallbladder. And the gallbladder is busy working, trying to produce some chemicals, take care of all this junk stuff. And finally it gets on overload, and a stone develops. And then something has to happen. There's a lot of trouble involved. Now, that's not the bad news. The bad news is, where there's one gallstone, there's likely to be other gallstones. You know why? Because the conditions are conducive to forming stones. So if you don't change the circumstances, you're going to have the same problems over and over and over. And I've seen drug addicts and alcoholics who continue to wrestle with the same problem because they don't change the circumstances. So the conditions remain the same and the problems remain the same. Well, let's apply that to all of us this morning. Your heart is designed to process your sin. And if you don't process that sin, it begins to build up. It grows hard and calloused. And where the conditions are right for sin to build up, other sins just flow into the tank, flow into the heart, and they stick right there. Now, that's not anatomically true, but it's spiritually true. God gave us a heart to process our sin. And David would say that, this sin in our heart is going to give us spiritual pain the way a gallstone gives us physical pain. So we're going to have spiritual pain and numbness as a result of this sin accumulating in our heart. David had been there. He knew what it was like to be numb and hurting. And he also understood the process of how to get your heart working again and how to cleanse it, rinse away the sin. He said the design is, first of all, you confess the sin. If you want your heart to process the sin, then you've got to confess it. You've got to acknowledge, come to grips with something that is wrong in your life. Quit the excuse, quit blaming other people, and say, this is wrong. Now, the little incident that I read at the beginning, I am not an anti-Georgia fan. So I'm just dealing with the story, the headlines. This man, athletic director, is facing now the consequences of his life. And in the fallout of that, there were other people involved. Let's go to Knoxville. Show that I'm equal opportunity. Let's look at the football team and what happened at the grill, the bar, Knoxville bar, or whatever it's called. We've lost 3 good players. There was an off-duty police officer involved. The football players are kicking the officer because allegedly the officer called them a name. Someone said, if anybody calls me that, I do the same thing. I said, no. It doesn't matter what people call you. You don't react that way. We don't react that way because it's wrong. So we start by confessing our sin and saying, I have sinned against God. And then, as much as humanly possible, we undo the effects. Now, you can't go back and change what has already been done. That's why it would do absolutely no good for you to walk up to someone and tell them about all the bad things they've done in the past, because they can't do anything about that. But we, like Zacchaeus, need to focus on undoing the effects of sin, which means that if there's someone that Pam robbed while she was an alcoholic or drug addict to support her habit, then she needs to go back to that person and say, I stole a towel from you, or I stole some of your silver. Please forgive me, and I can't pay it back, but here's the $20 I do have. That's all I have. Now, that's difficult, isn't it? We think sometimes if we just straighten it out with God, that we're going to be all right. That is why the world looks at us as a bunch of hypocrites. Because we sin against the world, then we confess to God and go on living as if we're okay, and the world's saying, wait just a minute. So David understood that you have to undo the effects of sin. And then thirdly, you have to commit to God not to do the same sin. Lord, I know this is wrong in your sight, and to the best of my ability, I will not put myself in circumstances where I will be tempted with that sin. Now notice how I worded that. I will not put myself in circumstances where I will be tempted with that sin. Verse 9, but you will have a son who will be a man of peace and rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. His name will be Solomon, and I will grant Israel peace and quiet during his reign. He is the one who will build a house for my name. He will be my son, and I will be his father. I will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. I love stories that end good. I would not want Pam to stand here this morning if she was still under the power, the domination, the control of drugs and alcohol. See, she's beyond that. I would not want this story from Chronicles to end with no temple. I like the fact that it looks forward to Solomon's life where there is peace and quiet. And you know, that's how I want my life to end. I want it to end with peace and quiet and everything be well. And I know that's what people want because they tell me. They want to end their struggles and their trials. They want to lay aside their differences.